Welcome to your D132 Typography 1 to our ex6, where we'll be matching the Children's Place and the Shelby logos, also the Smutty Nose, but we'll start off with Children's Place. I've done this in the past with Gravit, but now we're going to be doing it with Figma. And what you're going to do first is scroll down to Unit 5. Now this may stretch into Unit 6, but for now it's in Unit 5, and there's the link. This is the link to your shared file, so you can click on that one. And if you're logged into Figma, it should come up and it should say View Only. And I do have Children's Place, Shelby, and Smutty Nose in there, but we're going to be working on Children's Place right now. And the first thing you should do is, if it says View Only, which it should, is duplicate to your drafts and then open it. And it'll reopen as your file. And then go up here, double click on here, or you could rename, and then put your last name first initial. And I'll put mine in here. Then it's your file and you're ready to work on it. Now this is just an image. This was from some bag that we had, and I just took a picture of it, so it's a little distorted, so that will create some challenges, but that's okay. We'll match the type as best as we can. Sometimes you have to match fonts without actually having it in front of you or scanning things, all kinds of stuff I've done in the past. So we're going to try to match this as best we can, and we're going to use Google Fonts to match it because those are the fonts that are loaded up into Figma, which is quite a few. So we have a very large selection. We will not match it exactly because I don't know where they got this font from. It may not have been a Google font, but we'll come as close as we can, and it'll help us look at all the little details about the fonts and all the little characteristics that we need to match. And sometimes we'll find some fonts that have some characteristics of one letter but not the same of another. I think in the past I used Crimson Text, but the P doesn't close up. The counter is kind of open here. So we're going to look at a couple here, and sometimes I'll look at some and write them down and try different ones. And since I've done in the past, we'll be able to find ones that match pretty close. But again, we have some challenges here. So let's just look at this first. Before we go look at fonts, let's look at this. I'm going to zoom in here. And T, H, E are pretty standard. Now, a couple things to note. The E does have these little beaks in here. And remember, we call these things beaks, and barbs are the little things that kind of poke up. And you'll see them sometimes on C's, a little barb that'll poke up, but we don't have them. We do have little beaks here, and you know, you could call them serifs. They look like a serif, a sideways serif, so you could just call them a serif, that's okay. But these things on the E's are kind of beaks that kind of like staple removers, you know, those things that you squeeze on like that. They kind of look like beaks like that. And notice it does have a double one, because sometimes they'll just have a straight line in here. And it is a serif font, obviously, because you see a lot of thick, thin, thinner areas, thicker areas, kind of an old style serif font it looks like. It's not very thick, and notice that it has a lot of rounded, and when I say rounded, I'll move over here, sorry for going so fast. The transition between the stroke and the serif, there's a smooth transition. Sometimes you'll see it very angular, sometimes you'll see rounded edges here, and sometimes you'll see squared off. So this is squared off. Let me zoom out a little bit. Now I'm looking at the place part of it. And again, in here, very smooth transitions, and then very squared off. That's why I had you trace that letter E to get used to some of these. Now this does seem to flare out a little bit. It's not straight up and down. This seems to come straight down. This seems to flare out a little. And the C's, let's look at the C. Notice there's no barb up here, but there is a beak coming down, so there's just the slightest little lip. Down here it looks like it's kind of cut off, so it's not symmetrical, meaning the top and the bottom is not the same. Some C's have the top of the C looking like the bottom of the C, and that's not the case. And then also some characteristics, particularly R's, are very unique to the typeface. So this R has a leg coming down and it's rounded off. It's not flat, it doesn't have a serif coming over here, anything like that on its foot. So it's kind of rounded. It has kind of a rounded off heel, and it does close over here. So that's something to note about it. So the R is very distinctive. N's and M's and H's are usually very generic. The D, is kind of wide, has kind of a wide bowl in here, or the counter on the inside. It has a very wide counter here, so it's very open. It's not a very narrow letter, and some of that's the distortion that we're seeing because it's on a bag. So that's what we're going to look at. The L looks pretty standard, so we're going to use a couple of these letters, particularly the ones like the R and the C, even the A, because the apex is pretty pointy up there. Sometimes you'll see them they have a notch in them or all kinds of things going on, but we're going to look at this. So we're looking at serif fonts because we could tell it's a serif font. Why? Well, it has serifs on it, and it's not really slabby because it's fairly thin, and they're kind of, you know, very tapered down here. We don't have a lot of curves on the bottom of the serifs or feet like that, which you may see on Garamond and fonts like that. So we're going to look at some fonts here, and we're going to go to Google Fonts. So you can just type in Google Fonts and just search that. It should come up pretty easy, Google Fonts. And when Google Fonts comes up, you may see this thing here to select families. You could use these for web pages. I'm just going to use the X here and close that up. And you might say, well, how many fonts are we going to go through here? Well, there's only 1,400 to go through. Obviously, we're not going to do that. So we're going to go to categories here, and we're going to choose serif. And we're going to uncheck all the other ones. So we'll get rid of the monospace handwriting, which is like script. Display is like decorative. Sans serif, we're not going to use them. Now, they don't have a slab serif, so we're going to see a lot of slab serifs in here, so we're just going to have to avoid them. There's Roboto slab right there. And we're going to leave it sort by trending. And instead of looking at these letters here, we're going to put in capital letters because what we're working on here has all capital letters. So we might as well look at capital letters. So what we can do is type something in here. So I'm going to type in some of those letters. I'm going to put in a C because that's very distinctive, and an R, and a P, and an A, and maybe even an S, and maybe even an E, maybe even an L. We'll just see how that works. Any others we may want to see here? I don't think. The S is kind of interesting because does it have barbs up here? It's kind of squared off. So that's kind of interesting how the top of the S is. So that's a good one to look at. So we're going to try to match these and come up with a couple fonts that we're going to try and match them as close as possible. Not perfectly. I don't think we'll find something that works perfectly. And I have done this before, so I won't take forever going through these. But I have it sort by trending, and that's okay. And you can even make the point size a little bigger so they're nice and big. And right off the bat, you know, it's not that. Look how that looks. That has all those weird angles on it. This is too modern looking. And when we talk about a modern font, this is a modern serif. Very fine lines and very heavy lines. Fine, heavy, fine, heavy. This is very slabby. We have those big square slabs, so it's not that. Merriweather, it's not bad. Playfair Display, not bad, but you know, look at the R on here. It has that curled up R, and it has very fine lines in there, and it has these barbs coming up on the S's. And look at the C's. It has barbs coming up, it has beaks coming down, it has barbs coming down, beaks coming up. So it's symmetrical R. So the C and the R kind of takes it out from being what we're looking at. Merriweather's not bad, the C's not bad. So there's a lot of things you might see some similarities, but some of them may not work. Even in here, Laura, you might say, well, that looks good. But again, we have barbs coming up. We have that thing coming up. The R's kind of okay. There's square transitions in here, and all R's are kind of smooth. So it's definitely not that. And we're going to keep moving along here. And Noto serif isn't bad, but you can see the S is very kind of roundy at the top. I don't know if that's a good term, but it's roundy. And the E has none of those serifs in there. This one's a little close, but if you get in there, you can see there's none of those smooth transitions. They're not curved. They're very angular. So it's definitely not PT serif, even though they're fonts that look somewhat similar. Noto serif, again, very roundy around there. The S kind of takes it out. And Source serif, Bitter's not bad. Some of these aren't bad. And actually, one of the ones I'm going to write down, I'm not going to use this one, EB Garamond, because there's too much of that kind of roundiness on the serifs. They're not really cut off. This isn't bad. Actually, Crimson Text, even though the P doesn't go all the way over, we can fix that, but a lot of the other stuff looks very similar. You know, the E flares out a little there, it flares out a little here, but it's pretty close. It has that kind of roundy R there, and that's not bad. So I'm going to write that down. Crimson Text. So that's one of the ones we're going to look at, Crimson Text, and we'll try that out and see what works. And I'll keep going, seeing if there's anything better than that one so far. Arvo, no. And a lot of these just kind of cancel themselves out. This one doesn't look bad based on the R. The R looks really good. How about the C? No. No way. Look at the C. No way does that look like that C. So the C kind of rules it out, even though the R is very good. And it looks a little thicker. And usually what you're seeing is the lightest version when you first look at these. This one isn't bad. I can't even pronounce it, but it looks pretty good. Actually, the S looks good. The R could be rounded off. The C's are symmetrical, so it's not really that, but that's not a bad one. That's very similar to it. Nanum Mayangango Joe, whatever that is. I don't think I'm going to go with that one just because I don't want to have to say it. No, I'm just kidding. But that's not really it. There are probably heavier styles of it that might work, but the C's kind of take it out. But I might write that down. I'll just put Nanum in case I want to check it out. That's not very far off based on the S's. If I go in the styles here, if I went to the next one up, it may not be bad. Here's that one there, and actually the P looks good. Only the S is a little off, and the R is kind of squared off. We'd have to smooth that, but the rest of the letters look pretty good, actually. And it even is down and it flares out. Actually, I wasn't going to use this one, but that one looks pretty good, even though I can't pronounce it. Let me see. Nanum Mayanjo. I'll just call it Nanum. But that's not a bad one. The bold 700 actually isn't bad, so I'm going to write that down. Nanum, we have crimson text. I'll hit the back button here. And just to spare you all the time of going through this, I know there's another one that I've used in the past, and I think it's the one I've chosen, was Quattro Centro. So we'll go down here, see if we could find Quattro Centro. And you're going to find ones that have similarities, but I've been through these already, and it's worth looking through them. Crimson Pro is too angular, and it's a little thicker. Here's Quattro Centro. And the reason I like this one, even though the A isn't quite as pointy at the top, we can fix that. The S kind of matches, the C kind of matches, and the R kind of matches. So this has everything we want except for the A, which isn't that hard to fix the A on it if we have to, but everything else looks pretty good. So I'd say probably Quattro Centro number 1, maybe that Nanum number 2, and then Crimson Text 3. So I have those written down, so we're going to try those out. And we don't have to go through them. We don't have to check anything off here. I'm just looking because we will have these available. We should have them available. Every once in a while you'll go in and you won't find something, but most of these are available in Figma. So anyway, I'm going to go here and kind of zoom out again, and I'm going to start typing. So I'm on the Children's Place page, and I'm going to take my text tool and just go above here and just click, and I'll just type the Children's. I'll do the Children's first, apostrophe S. And if you click off, it'll select that box. And then I'll go down here, and it's Enter right now. I'm going to change that to Crimson. We'll try Crimson first. Crimson Text, not Crimson Pro. And I'll go to my Scale tool, because we could change the point size, but I'll go to my Scale tool and just kind of drag it up. Now, you can see I did it in lowercase. To make it caps, what you can do is get off the Scale tool and go to the Move tool. And then go down here where those 3 dots are, and let's make it all caps. They have a case down here, and you could just do all caps. So that looks okay. I'll close this up. So there's the Children's, and this is Crimson Text. Now it's a little big right now, so let me just scale it down. Now if you do this, I'm scaling it with the Move tool. It's going to make the box shorter, and the text won't fit in there. So I'm going to undo that. And I mean, and even if you did that, even if you did this, and you're like, oh man, what happened? Just go down here and just put auto width on here, and that'll just stretch out the box so it fits the text. And you could even do auto on the bottom, so in case you have an extra space there or something. So we'll leave it like that, and then go back to the Scale tool and just scale it down a little bit, and we're going to kind of just lay it on there. Now we may have to adjust the spacing a little. Let's go back. That looks pretty good. Now we cannot stretch and condense things in here. We're going to have to do that after we convert them to outlines, and I'll tell you more about that. But that looks not bad. That's not bad. It's probably a little on the larger side right now. I'm going to get it in there so it's about the same width as that. Now it won't be perfect because it's on a picture of a bag, but that looks pretty good. And we'll try another one. I'll move this kind of out of the way. Now, if you want to have the background so you could have things off to the side, that's probably a good thing you might want to do. If this is black back here and you want to put text on here, just go here, make sure you're on the Move tool. You'll see options. And if you're on your Move tool and you go over here, scroll up, and it has background. Now, if you want to make it like gray or something like that, you could make it a light gray, whatever you want. You can do something like that. That way you can move text off to the side here. Now it's here, but it basically goes above the letter. That's okay. You could bring it back in. When you want to bring it back in, you could bring it back in, and it'll be on the letter, on the frame. So it's kind of off the page. So when it's off the page, it's kind of above there right now. That's okay. Let's make a copy, and let's type place. Now it's in all caps, so I just have to type place, and I'll click off of it. Now you can see it's real wide there, so you could go down here and go auto width, And then to scale it, remember how to scale it? Scale tool. Scale it up nice and high like that. And we're not going to stretch it or do anything. We're going to get it as close as we can right now, because we can stretch it later, but I don't want to do that yet. We want to get the letter spacing and all that stuff as close as we can. Make it a little bit bigger so that it's the same height. Well, actually, we can stretch it. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to move that up there. Put that up there. And that's crimson text. Now, let's make a copy here. I'm going to do Alt. I'll drag. And I'm going to change this and get off the scale tool if you can't see the text. And I'm going to try that Nanum. First of all, let's make sure we have Nanum. Nanum, it was one that was really hard. Nanum my Yongo. And there it is. And I'm going to make the auto width again. And did I lose the S here? Oh, it's off the page. So if it's on here, it's going to get kind of cropped off. You won't see it. I just want to point that out. So that's there. And we can make this, I think it wasn't regular, it was kind of the bold. And that doesn't look bad. Let's kind of zoom in here and kind of compare these. Now, you can see the C is definitely a little bit different of this one, the Crimson Pro. This one, I think the top looks okay. They're kind of very similar. The L's look okay, the D's look okay. The R, it doesn't have the rounded R, but we could fix that. The E, I don't know, looks a little better because that one flares out and that one comes down straight. And that's what I thought this did a little bit. So that's kind of the same. The R we'd have to fix. The C we'd have to fix. I'm not sure about this one. So I'm just going to put that off to the side right now and try one more. I'm going to put that off to the side. And this one is Crimson Text. I'm going to make a copy of this again. And I'll just drag this on. And this one I'm going to try Quattrocentro. So I'm going to go in here, QU, and there's Quattrocentro. Not sans, because that would be a sans serif. So let's try Quattrocentro. And let's put on the auto width. And it's in regular. That looks okay. Let me zoom in here. And that's not too bad. Now, we do have a little dip in here. Now, it's hard to see if there's a dip here or not, but there's a little dip here. But the serifs look not bad. I mean, like I said, we're not going to find one that's perfect, but the C looks pretty good. That's a nice C. It's not as pointy at the bottom as that one, and it's not cut off as much. This one looks like it gets cut off a little bit more, but that's okay. The H looks pretty good. All the other stuff looks good. The D's, the R looks pretty good. It looks a little bit wider, but we can put a little space in between them. You can see the tracking here, or the letter spacing is spread out a little bit, so we might want to do that. So we're kind of at the point where we may want to choose one of these. And I think it's between this one and maybe the one up here. Other than we'd have to do some work to the R and the C. I think I'm going to stay with this one. So just for now, I think we're going to stay with this. Let's try place and see what that looks like in the Quattrocentro. So I could take this place and make a copy. And I'm just holding down Alt or Option. And you could always duplicate. And I'll bring it in here. And I'll change this one. Now, again, if you're not seeing text options here, make sure you go back to the Move tool. And I'm going to try Quattro here. And it's Quattrocento. And right away you can see the A is not perfect, but we could fix the A. But everything else looks pretty good. Looks like it's going to be a little more narrow in terms of that, and a little taller. So let me scale it up a little. Again, to scale, go to the scale tool. Now we could change the point sizes, but I'll scale that up a little bit so it's the same height. Now those letters might be, that's actually not bad. Some of the letters look narrower, and that's only because of the distortion. So we have to kind of find a little middle ground with that. So I'm going to scale this down, and then we could probably just stretch them up and get them as close as we can. So I think I'm going to stay with the Quattrocentro for now. And you could use any one you want. You could start messing around with it a little bit, but I'm going to stay with the Quattrocentro, I think, and that may involve changing the A a little bit. And it may involve changing something else, maybe the C a little bit if we have to bring a point down. But we already worked with anchor points a little bit, so that may be able to help. So this one is, let me get off the scale tool again. This one is Quattrocentro, and this is Quattrocentro. So let's go with Quattrocentro, and we'll see how that goes, because it'll be a little bit easier just messing with the A a little bit. and getting these fonts together. So I'm going to stop there. That'll be part 1 of ex6. And then for part 2, we're going to start really matching this up a little bit to get the Children's Place logo kind of as close as we can to the original.